Hi everyone, this is the first video that I'm doing for the HSC course. This first video is going to be an overview of what's in the HSC course, what we're doing for the next 4 terms, about all the different modules and requirements and the different texts that we're going to be looking at. So that'll be today's video, and then the next video will be a short introduction to the first book we're doing, okay, which I've mentioned on the Google Classroom, the book called Past the Shallows, and the module that's part of. Okay, so the first thing that we're starting off with now, and this will take up pretty much all of this term, and we'll have the assessment task for it towards the end of this term. I think it's down for week 8 at the moment. It's the common module, okay, and it's called the common module because advanced and standard and studies do it. It doesn't mean that they all do the same text or book. Okay, the book we're doing is not the book that our standard classes are going to be doing, or our studies classes. But it's the common module, and they do a common module because they need something to make it easy to compare the marks at the end of the day between kids who did advanced and standard, mainly, and also studies to an extent. So they need everyone to do part of the course the same. And after the common module, it becomes divergent, okay? Then there's advanced modules that only advanced does, and there's standard and studies modules that only they do. Okay, so the common module is called Texts and Human Experiences, okay? And the thing that's always struck me about texts and human experiences is, well, I mean, what isn't a human experience, okay? The notion of human experiences, which is what we're meant to be looking at, is such a broad sort of idea that everything would qualify. Okay, what isn't a human experience? Well, the experience of an animal or a tree, I suppose, but, we tend not to have books written from the point of view of, dogs or trees, although I'm sure there are some. But everything we do is going to be about human experiences. And that's what we'll be looking at. So they've created this module title, which is extraordinarily broad. Okay, so it means that basically anything is able to be studied and talked about and referenced when we're doing it. Okay, but it's called Texts and Human Experiences. In the next video, I'm going to break down what that means, because there's like an official definition of it. I've already put that on the Google Classroom. It's a screenshot from a website, and you can have a look at that. And I'll go through it later, though. It's it's wordier than it should be, though. So I'll just simplify it when I do the video about that later on. Okay, so Texts and Human Experiences takes like pretty much all of this term. And the book, as I've mentioned, is this book. Here it is, Past the Shallows by Fayval Parrott. This book is the first Australian thing that we've done. It's an Australian book. It's set in Tasmania. Okay, it's set mainly on Bruny Island at the south of Tasmania, also partly in other parts of Tasmania like Hobart. Oscar the Grouch, it's me. So it's the first Australian literature that we've done. It's the first literature written by a woman that we've done. Fayval Parrott is a female author. And it's by far the most modern thing we've done, okay? When you think about it, well, Gatsby's quite old, okay? 20s America. Orwell was 1937. Shakespeare's hundreds of years old. This book was first published in 2011, okay? So this book is 10 years old. And so that's going to make it a very different thing to read from the other things that we've done. So it's Australian and it's modern. I've not taught it before, so I'm looking forward to teaching it. The reason I picked this is because I've done HSC marking for quite a few years, including marking. This is marking in the exam centre with 300 teachers in a room and marking the exams from other schools and all over the state, and marking the section in which this is used, Texts and Human Experiences. And so I marked students' responses to this book before I ever read the book, and that made me want to read the book. And it's a good book for our purposes because, number one, it's sort of literary. Okay, it's like quality literature, but it's not excessively long. I've got the audiobook version of the book, and it's only about it's less than 5 hours. Okay, which is on the short side for a novel. So it's not an onerous read, but it seems to work well with the sort of questions that you'll be asked in the Text and Human Experiences module. Okay, I'll talk more about that book in the next video though. Okay, now the assessment for that is going to be multimodal. Okay, now we're required to do that. That's a syllabus requirement. So we have to do that somewhere in the HSC course, a multimodal. We've decided to put it here. Okay, so that'll sort of be, we've done that before. It's basically, we did it for King Lear before, right? It's a presentation sort of thing, okay? You'll also need I'll talk about it later, but you'll also need a related text for it, for Text and Human Experiences. So your own, book, poem, film, whatever, which will be part of the assessment task, but we'll go into that in more detail later. Okay, now when we come back, we'll probably, Module A is what comes next, Module A of the advanced course. Module A is called Textual Conversations. And in this, we look at two texts and we look at how they relate to each other, basically. Okay. Now, in this section, this is where we do our Shakespeare. Okay, so we're doing the Shakespeare play Richard III. And the other text that we look at is a documentary called Looking for Richard. Okay, because Richard III is an interesting play because there's a lot of controversy about how the character King Richard III is depicted. Okay, he's basically in the play made to look like a very bad king. And there's political reasons for that, okay, which I'm not going to go into that now, but that'll be something we're looking at a lot later on. And the documentary Looking for Richard, it's a documentary about the real life Richard III. And so we look at how, the play represents the real history and the real person, or how it doesn't perhaps, and issues of, prejudice and bias and political influence and all of those things. Okay, so we'll probably just start that a little bit at the end of this term, but basically that's most of term 1 next year. Okay, there's an assessment task for that towards the end of term 1 next year. That'll be a take-home essay. Okay. All right. Okay, then there's something called the craft of writing. Okay. So far we've looked at the common module and module A. Then there's something called the craft of writing. The craft of writing is also something which is in the standard course, but the texts are completely separate. And craft of writing it's shorter. We spend less time doing it than the modules. So I'm planning to do the craft of writing at the end of term 1 and the start of term 2, okay, for about 2 weeks and 2 weeks, so about 4 weeks in total. And with the craft of writing, you don't do a long text, okay? Everything else we've discussed so far is a long text, a novel, a play, a documentary. You do short texts, okay? So short bits of writing. Tentatively, I've picked the two things we're doing for that is an essay called Politics in the English Language by George Orwell. We've already got our background in Orwell, so that helps. And a very famous short story, a long short story called Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, about the man who turns into a cockroach, which is one of my favourite things, really. Okay, but craft of writing, the idea with craft of writing is that we read things and we use them as a springboard to do our own writing. Okay. That comes with an assessment task, okay? That assessment task takes place at the end of term 2, and it's a creative writing sort of assessment task, okay? Using the two short texts, Metamorphosis and Politics in the English Language, as a sort of springboard for writing it. Okay, the last thing we have to study is Module B, okay? Module B is what we're mostly studying in term 2. Okay, so as I said, we study the craft of writing at the end of term 1 and the start of term 2, and the rest of term 2 we spend on module B. Okay, module B is called Critical Study of Texts, And it basically means that you just pick one thing and you study it very, very thoroughly, okay? And not looking at it through a lens, not looking at it through a concept necessarily. Okay, this is where we have to do our poetry, okay? And we're going to do this on the poetry of T.S. Eliot, probably the most famous modern poet, the most important poet of the 20th century, okay? So there's about 4 poems we have to look at there by T.S. Eliot, and they are longish poems and they are complicated, but they are very interesting, okay? And I've got a lot to say about that. I studied T.S. Eliot quite extensively at uni. It's one of the things I like the best. And so I'm looking forward to doing that with you. Okay, that's the content of the HSC course. So everything I've discussed takes us up to the end of term 2. They're moving when we do the trials. When you do the trials next year, it's going to be term 3, weeks 5 and 6. Which means that term 3, weeks 1 to 4 is revision of the whole course, okay, to revise everything that we've done, common module, module A, craft of writing, and module B, okay, in order to get you ready for the trials. Now, there's no separate assessment task for module B, okay? The only time the school assesses you on module B, which is critical study of text, which is poetry, is during the trial exam. So what we do is the weighting of that part of the trial exam is higher, okay, to compensate for the fact that there's no separate assessment task. Okay, so that's an overview of the course. So now you know everything that's in it. So just to revise quickly, okay, we're going to read this in term 4. The Shakespeare that we do is Richard III, but we look at that in conjunction with the documentary Looking for Richard. Then we do the craft of writing, where we look at short texts and do our own creative writing. And the short texts are Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka and Politics in the English Language by George Orwell. And then in term 2, we do module B, which is poetry, which is the poetry of T.S. Eliot. And then revision in term 3 and trials in term 3. And then after trials, we just get ready for the final exams by continuing to do revision, but mostly in the form of exam practice at that point, because there's nothing else to do at that point except get ready for the exams. Okay, now if there's any questions about any of that, or you'd like any clarification, ask on the Google Classroom, or email me if you prefer, and I'll clarify for you. Okay, I'm going to do another video towards the end of next week, which is just a short introduction on Past the Shallows by Fable Parrott. You need to get the book for that. Okay, the book is available to be picked up from school. I've put that information on the Google Classroom a few times. So do that, or source your own copy, which is perfectly fine. Or you could get like a Kindle copy, or something you can read on a tablet or whatever, doesn't matter. Because I'm going to start doing videos about that, and we're going to start doing Zooms about that in next week in term 2, and so you need to have got the book and have started reading the book at that point. Okay, see you very soon. Bye-bye.